The girl hadn't eaten in nearly 2 days. Her lips were split and dry, her eyes rimmed red from dust, hunger, and fear. Coarse hemp rope bit into her wrists, leaving angry welts that burned each time she shifted. The sun above Dodge City was merciless that summer, a white-hot brand searing everything it touched. Even the air shimmered, whispering judgment across the yard. She sat on the edge of a creaking wagon in front of the stock pens, barefoot, trembling, her dress torn to rags. Laughter surrounded her, hard, cruel laughter from men who smelled of sweat and whiskey. They said she ought to be grateful she was still breathing. But Lyla Byrne felt no gratitude. She felt like livestock waiting to be ordered about. When she finally spoke, her voice came thin as wind through a graveyard. "Please." "Do it quick," no one turned. The crowd was busy bartering her like a beast of burden. Silas Crow, the trader who dragged her off the Santa Fe Trail, waved a crumpled sheet of paper overhead. He joked she ate more than she was worth and someone had best take her before the marshal came snooping. His laughter scraped against the walls like rust. Then a stranger stepped forward from the ring of faces. A wide-brimmed hat cast his eyes in shadow, sweat tracing lines through the dust on his shirt. Eli McKenna, 56, rancher, known across the plains for his temper and for the silence he carried since burying his wife. He studied the girl for a long moment, saying nothing, his thumbs hooked over the belt where a wedding band once hung. "How much?" His voice was low, steady. Silas sneered. "She's used and her tongue's a nuisance. Give me $1 and she's yours." The men laughed, and a sharp, ugly sound. A human life, worth a single coin. Eli reached into his pocket, drew out one tarnished dollar and let it fall onto the barrel between them. The metallic clink sliced through the noise like a bullet. The yard fell still. He didn't reach for the girl or loosen her bindings. He only said, "Get down from that wagon." Lyla hesitated, thinking maybe he meant to finish what others had started. A quick end. A mercy, perhaps. Maybe that was what freedom looked like here, where people were cheaper than mules. Still she rose, legs shaking, bracing for the blow that never came. Eli turned back to Silas. "Sign your name on that paper," he ordered. "Let every man here see this deal belongs to you." Silas frowned but obeyed. Eli's tone had the weight of a man who didn't bluff. In frontier law, even a single dollar sealed a transaction. The joke was now evidence. Proof that Silas Crow had sold another human being in Dodge City. And Eli McKenna knew exactly what that meant. When Lyla understood what he'd done, her knees buckled. He hadn't bought her, he'd freed her. The laughter died. The wind carried the smell of dust, iron, and cattle through the silent yard. She looked at the stranger, unsure whether to thank him or fear him. Somewhere deep inside her, a question trembled awake. If a man could purchase her freedom for $1, what price would he expect in return? The road out of Dodge stretched endless and pale, the sun bleeding red over the plains as evening fell. Lyla rode on the sideboard, her hands raw, her thoughts spinning. She was free, or so the man claimed. Yet freedom meant little when you had nowhere to run. Eli rode ahead, quiet as dusk itself, a man who had already buried more words than he could ever speak. He didn't ask her story. He didn't ask what Silas had done. He only said, "We'll ride till the river. You can rest there. Evenin', stranger. Every trail's got a story more, and this one's worth riding for. Before we start, hit that subscribe button and tell me where you're listening from, what country, what corner of the world. Now grab your coffee and saddle up, and the story's about to ride. Eat there," he said, nodding toward the bread. By the time the sun sank low behind the hills, they had reached the Arkansas River. Its surface gleamed like a ribbon of molten silver catching the fading light. Eli set up camp in silence, his movements deliberate and practiced. When the fire caught, he handed her a canteen and half a loaf of bread. There was no warmth in his eyes, but no cruelty either. Only a quiet steadiness that felt like duty more than kindness. When she tried to whisper her thanks, he brushed it off. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "That $1 wasn't payment for you. It was the price to stop something wrong, not to start something worse." That night, the cries of coyotes echoed across the plains, thin and haunting under the wide sky. The stars felt close enough to graze with a fingertip, and Lyla felt impossibly small beneath them. She watched Eli sitting by the fire, carving a piece of cedar into the shape of a horse's head. His hands were rough, scarred from years of labor, yet they moved with care and patience. For the first time in years, she saw something in a man that reminded her of the father she wished she'd known. After a long silence, she asked, "Why'd you help me? You didn't even know who I was." He didn't look up. His knife kept tracing the lines of the horse's neck. "Didn't have to know," he said. "I knew the man selling you, and I knew he's the kind who'd trade his own shadow for a sip of whiskey." Her chest tightened at that, not from fear but something close to hope. Maybe there were still men left in the world who saw more than what people cost. When dawn came, she woke to find a clean shirt folded neatly near her blanket. It was far too big for her, but it smelled of smoke and soap and something honest. For the first time in months, Lyla laughed. Eli looked over, surprised, and the corner of his mouth twitched. Almost a smile, but not quite. They rode again through the tall prairie grass, wind cool against her face. She didn't know where they were headed, maybe to his ranch near Cimarron, maybe nowhere at all. But for once, the road didn't feel like a sentence. At a narrow creek, she knelt to wash her hands. The water ran red with old dirt and dried blood. Eli's voice came from behind her, calm and steady. "Don't look back too much," he said. "Out here, it's the surest way to lose where you're going." She nodded, unable to speak. As the sun dipped again, the world seemed wide and alive. Hope was fragile, yes, but it was real now, fluttering in her chest like something newly born. She thought maybe, just maybe, the worst of her life had been left behind in Dodge. But she was wrong. Because back in that town, someone had already noticed Eli McKenna had taken something no man was meant to buy, and that someone was coming. 2 days later, the dust of Dodge found them again. It always did. Trouble in that town never stayed buried long. They had stopped near Cimarron Creek. Eli was mending a wagon wheel, his sleeves rolled, sweat shining on his arms. Lyla was boiling coffee in an old tin pot, the smell mingling with wood smoke. For a brief, quiet moment, it almost looked like peace. Then came the sound of hooves. 3 riders cutting through the silence. The lead one wore a badge that had long since lost its meaning. Deputy Ward, a man who served the same law that turned its back when Silas Crow sold people like cattle. Eli stood slowly, squaring himself. "Afternoon, Ward," he said evenly. The deputy grinned, lazy and mean. "Afternoon, McKenna. Heard you bought yourself a girl. Folks in Dodge been talking." Ward's grin spread wider, his eyes gleaming with the kind of hunger that had nothing to do with food. Silas had promised him a cut if he brought the girl back. Lyla froze. She recognized that tone. She'd heard it before, right before men decided what a woman was worth. Eli didn't move. "You heard wrong," he said. Ward laughed, sharp and mocking. "Now come on. You paid for her. Dollar or not, that makes her yours. Law says property's gotta be registered." The 2 men behind him chuckled under their breath. Eli's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed calm. "Law also says if you forge a sale, you hang for it." Ward's grin faltered. He wasn't used to being told no. He spat into the dust. "Keep talking, old man. You'll lose more than cattle. Maybe that ranch of yours, too." Before Eli could speak, Lyla stepped forward, trembling but fierce. "I'm not property," she said, her voice shaking but unbroken. "He bought my freedom, not me." Ward turned his horse toward her, his grin thinning. "You think anyone's going to believe that?" The question hung between them like gun smoke after a duel. Eli's hand drifted toward his belt. Slow, deliberate. The movement was enough. The other riders tugged their reins, giving him a little more space. A silent admission that the old man meant what he said. Ward's smirk returned, though tighter now. He jabbed a finger toward Lyla. "You 2 stay clear of Dodge. Next time I see you, that paper you're holding won't be worth a damn." He yanked the reins, turned his horse, and galloped off laughing. The echo of hooves faded into the plains until only the wind remained. Lyla sank down beside the fire, the tin cup rattling in her trembling hands. "They'll come back," she whispered. Eli looked out toward the dying sun, a red ember sinking into the horizon. "Yeah," he said quietly. "They will." The coffee boiled over, hissing in the flames. Its bitter scent filled the air, sharp as iron. That night neither of them slept much. The stars looked smaller somehow, and every cry from a distant coyote felt too close, too knowing. By dawn, the trail no longer felt safe. Something in the air had shifted. The law wasn't behind them anymore, it was hunting them. And that's where the true storm of this tale begins. So before we ride into it, take a breath, pour yourself a cup of coffee, or tea if that's your poison, and tell me where you're listening from, and what time it is out there. Because if you're still with me now, it means you love a story as much as I do. Go on, hit that subscribe button, and don't miss what happens when the West turns its guns on its own. By the third night, the wind had changed. It carried the scent of rain and something darker, gunpowder. Eli smelled it before he heard a thing. He didn't waste words. He loaded the rifle, tied down the wagon cover, and told Lyla, "Keep the lantern low." They were crossing Rayton Pass, a deep scar of red rock between Kansas and New Mexico. The trail twisted through shadows, the sky black and starless. Below, the valley stretched wide and hollow, silent except for the steady creak of the wagon wheels. Lyla sat beside him, gripping the reins so tight her knuckles whitened. She could feel it too, the heaviness in the air, the stillness before trouble breaks. It started with a glint of light on the ridge. Then another. 3 riders. Eli didn't have to guess who. Silas, he muttered, voice like gravel. The man who'd once sold her for $1 was back, not for profit this time, but revenge. Ward had told him where to find them. The riders came fast, hooves tearing the ground, dust glowing ghostly in the starlight. "Hold on," Eli shouted. From the ridge, Silas Crow bellowed, his voice thick with fury and humiliation, still burning from the laughter that had chased him out of Dodge. He cracked his reins, sending his horse charging downhill. The wagon lurched forward, wheels hammering over rock. Bullets split the night. One tore through the sideboard, another grazed Eli's arm. He didn't slow. Lyla grabbed the rifle from the seat. Her hands trembled, but her breath came steady. She fired once, missed, fired again. The report echoed through the canyon like thunder rolling off stone. Silas cursed and yanked his horse back, ducking behind a boulder. His men followed, reloading. Eli seized the moment, steering the wagon toward the riverbed below. The horses stumbled, dirt sprang, but they made it down just before another round of gunfire cracked the air. At the bottom, Eli jumped off. "Get behind the rocks," he shouted. "I'm not leaving you." "Do as I say." She ran, heart pounding, crouching in the shadows while Eli took cover behind the wagon, reloading. Up on the ridge, Silas's men spread out, their laughter echoing across the pass, cruel, jagged, and close. Then silence, a match struck. Light flared. Flames began crawling across the dry grass, catching fast in the wind. Silas had set the brush ablaze, smoke curling like snakes into the sky. Eli moved before thought could stop him, grabbing a blanket and beating down the sparks. But the fire's glow betrayed him. Through the haze, Lyla saw his silhouette. Strong, steady, defiant. Her fingers tightened around the rifle. She whispered, barely audible above the crackle of fire, "Please, do it quick." But this time the words weren't born of fear. They came from resolve. She pulled the trigger. The gunshot split the night. Maybe it was luck, or maybe it was the only thing her father had ever truly taught her before selling their last horse. How to hit what mattered. Still riding with us? Then you're one of the few who love a good story. Go on, tap that follow and drop your country's name in the comments so I know where my writers come from. How to steady a rifle when fear tries to steal your aim. That was the last lesson her father ever gave her. And that night it saved them both. The fire dimmed to embers as the sound of a man's body struck the ground. The canyon fell silent except for the hiss of cooling ash. Silas's men turned tail, spooked by what they'd seen, galloping back into the darkness with only the echo of their hooves lingering like ghosts. Lyla let the rifle slip from her hands and stumbled toward Eli. He was down but breathing, blood soaking through his sleeve. She dropped beside him, pressing trembling hands to the wound. "You're not leaving me," she whispered. "Not now." Eli's eyes fluttered open just enough to catch her face glowing in the firelight. A faint smile crossed his lips. "You've got fire in you, girl," he rasped. But before she could answer, another sound rolled through the canyon. Hooves again. More riders. And these ones didn't laugh. They wore badges that glinted cold under the fading stars. Morning crawled in heavy and gray. Smoke still hung low over the ridge. The river below tinted with ash and the reflection of fire long gone. Eli was alive, though pale. The blood had dried dark on his arm. Lyla sat beside him, hands shaking, heart steady. They had survived the night. The riders with badges never reached them. Maybe they turned back. Word had likely already spread. Silas Crow was dead. And Deputy Ward, knowing his own name was tied to that crooked deal, vanished before the marshals came sniffing around. Maybe, for once, justice had found its own way. Maybe they finally understood that not every man who breaks the law is a criminal, and not every woman who runs is lost. By midday, they reached Fort Union. The marshal there listened to their story and studied the paper bearing Silas's signature. He'd known Silas years back, the kind of man who sold cattle, land, and souls with equal ease. That single scrawl of ink was enough proof. $1. A single coin that told the truth about who the real criminals were. That was all it took to turn what looked like a sale into salvation. When the marshal released them, Eli straightened his back, older but somehow stronger. He looked at Lyla and said, "You're free now, truly free." On the road out of Fort Union, the wind carried the scent of wet grass and rain. Lyla turned to him and asked softly, "Where will you go now?" Eli gazed out across the endless prairie. "Wherever the world still needs people like us," he said. Then he handed her the paper with her name written across it. She stared at it, tears burning her eyes. No one had ever written her name on anything that mattered before. That night they camped near Cimarron. The prairie rolled like an ocean under a dark sky, the wind cool and alive. Lyla sat by the fire, clutching that paper to her chest. And for the first time she understood. Freedom wasn't something someone handed you. It was something you claimed for yourself. Breath by breath, mile by mile, fight by fight. Eli smiled at her from across the flames. "The world will keep trying to sell you cheap," he said quietly. "Don't ever let it tell you your worth." Lyla nodded. She understood now. Every scar, every mile, every tear had carried her to this moment, to a place where she could finally choose her own story. When dawn came, she saddled her horse herself. The land stretched wide and golden ahead of her, endless as hope. Somewhere out there waited new towns, new names, new lives waiting to be built. She turned to Eli. "You coming with me?" He grinned. "If you'll have me." And so they rode out together, two souls once broken, side by side, chasing something greater than forgiveness. They were chasing peace. Maybe that's what the West was always about. Not gold, not land, but the courage to start again no matter what had been taken from you. Tell me, if you'd been there that day, would you have paid that $1 to set her free? Or would you have walked away? If this story touched something in you, give it a like so others can find it too. And if you believe in second chances or in people rediscovering their worth, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It means more than you know. Now pour yourself another cup of coffee, lean back, and tell me, where are you listening from tonight? Because out here in the West, every story begins the same way and ends with someone brave enough to change it. The fire's burning low and the wind still whispering across the plains. Tell me, would you have paid that $1 to set her free? If this story touched you, give it a like, hit subscribe, and tell me, where in the world are you listening from tonight?